The rhythmic tap of his cane against the cracked pavement was a familiar sound on 78th Avenue. Clarence M. Doyle, 90 years young and a Marine through and through, took his morning constitutional with a precision born of decades of discipline. The Oakland sun, a hazy orange ball just cresting the horizon, warmed his face. He inhaled deeply, the city air strange mix of exhaust fumes and the burgeoning scent of jasmine from Mrs. Rodriguez's overgrown front yard. Another day above ground, he thought, a quiet satisfaction settling in his chest. It wasn't much, just a simple walk. But it was his ritual, his anchor in a world that seemed to spin faster each day. Morning, Clarence, Mr. Kelvin called from his porch, her mug warming his hands. Calvin, a man whose life revolved around televised sports and the meticulous tending of his prize-winning roses, was a fixture on the avenue. His greeting, as predictable as the sunrise, was part of the rhythm of Clarence's morning. Morning, Calvin, Clarence reply. A small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. He dipped his head in acknowledgement. The brim of his worn baseball cap, emblazoned with the Marine Corps eagle, globe, and anchor, momentarily obscuring his eyes. Good man, Calvin, he mused, keeps to himself, but always a kind word. Clarence continued his slow but steady pace. Each step was a small victory, a testament to his enduring spirit. He reached the corner store, its brightly colored awning a splash of vibrancy in the otherwise muted cityscape. The bell above the door jingled a cheerful welcome as he entered. Semper Fi, Mr. Doyle. Rog, the store owner, greeted him from behind the counter. Rog, a recent immigrant, had an earnest smile and an accent Clarence couldn't quite place. The young man's respect for the old Marine was palpable, a silent acknowledgement of shared values that transcended cultural divides. Semper Fi, son, Clarence responded, the familiar phrase a comforting weight on his tongue. He moved towards the candy aisle, the crinkling of cellophane wrappers a symphony of sweet possibilities. Just one peppermint, he told himself, though he often ended up with 2, sometimes 3. It was a small indulgence, a sweet punctuation mark to his morning routine. He selected a red and white striped peppermint swirl and placed it on the counter. Rog rang him up, the transaction a silent exchange of mutual respect. As Clarence stepped back onto the sidewalk, unwrapping his candy, a flicker of movement in his peripheral vision caught his attention. A group of teenagers, huddled together, their faces illuminated by the glow of their phones, were approaching. Clarence didn't pay them much mind. He'd seen them around before, nosy and full of themselves, but harmless enough. He focused on the sweet, cool taste of the peppermint, a small pleasure in a world that seemed increasingly devoid of them. He wasn't prepared for the shove. It came out of nowhere, a sudden, brutal force that sent him sprawling onto the pavement. The cane clattered away, his brittle bones protesting the impact. The world spun for a moment, a dizzying kaleidoscope of colors and sounds. Then, a sharp pain shot through his hip, a white-hot agony that stole his breath. He lay there, winded and disoriented, the peppermint rolling away like a forgotten marble. He heard laughter, cruel and sharp, echoing in the morning air. He saw blurry figures, their phones still pointed at him, recording his humiliation. A wave of shame washed over him, hot and stinging. He, a Marine, reduced to this. The laughter faded, replaced by panicked whispers. A woman's voice, sharp and insistent, cut through the haze. Are you all right? What did you do that for? Then, another voice, deeper, more authoritative. Call 911. Somebody call an ambulance. Clarence tried to focus, to push back the fog of pain and confusion. He saw faces hovering above him, expressions of concern and outrage etched on their features. He felt the hand on his shoulder, gentle but firm. "Don't move, sir. Help is on the way." The voice was calm, reassuring. Clarence closed his eyes, a wave of exhaustion washing over him. He heard the sirens in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. Disgraceful, he thought, the word echoing in the chambers of his heart. A Marine brought down by a bunch of kids. The world dissolved into a cacophony of sounds and sensations. He felt hands lifting him, the jostling movement sending fresh waves of pain through his body. He heard snippets of conversations, urgent and concerned. He smelled the antiseptic tang of the approaching ambulance. Then, a familiar phrase, spoken low and fierce, reached his ears. "Semper Fi, Marine." It was a lifeline, a whisper of hope in the darkness. Clarence opened his eyes, his gaze locking onto the face of a man he didn't recognize, but whose bearing, whose eyes, spoke volumes. He knew that look. He'd seen it in the eyes of his brothers in arms, in the trenches, under fire. It was the look of unwavering loyalty, of shared sacrifice. He knew, with a certainty that defied the pain and the confusion, that he wasn't alone. The morning sun, a pale disk through the haze, cast long shadows that stretched and contracted with the rhythm of Clarence's steady gait. 90 years had etched themselves onto his face, a roadmap of laughter lines and sun-weathered creases. But his eyes, the color of faded denim, held a youthful spark. He hummed a tuneless melody, a habit from his days in the cause, a silent affirmation that the day, like every other, was good. He nodded to Mr. Calvin, watering his petunias with the same meticulous care he likely once applied to a gleaming M1 Garand. "Morning, Clarence," Mr. Calvin chirped, his voice rusty but warm. Clarence returned the greeting, a familiar comfort settling over him. This routine, this simple exchange, was the bedrock of his existence, a gentle reminder that he was a part of something larger than himself. He reached the corner of 78th and MacArthur. The aroma of frying bacon from the diner across the street momentarily eclipsing the sweet scent of Rod's jasmine vines. Rod's corner store was a haven, a repository of childhood delights, brightly colored candy, baseball cards, and comic books. Clarence always stopped for a handful of butterscotch candies, a small indulgence that punctuated his morning walk. He patted his pocket, ensuring the crumpled dollar bill was still there. A flicker of anticipation, childlike and pure, danced in his denim blue eyes. A gaggle of teenagers loitered near the store's entrance, their laughter echoing sharply against the morning quiet. Clarence registered their presence with a vague unease. Their clothes hung loose, their eyes darted about with a restless energy that seemed to vibrate in the air. He'd seen this kind of energy before, a volatile cocktail of boredom and bravado. He hoped they wouldn't cause any trouble for Rog. The old man cherished his quiet corner of the world. Their laughter intensified, a high-pitched, almost hysterical sound. One of them, a tall, lanky boy with a shock of red hair, held up a phone, its screen glowing brightly. They huddled together, whispering and giggling, their attention fixed on the device. Clarence felt a prickle of unease. Something about their demeanor, the intensity of their focus, felt wrong. He tried to dismiss the feeling, attributing it to the weariness of age. "Watch this," the red-haired boy muttered, his voice laced with a disturbingly gleeful anticipation. He stepped away from the group, phone still recording, his eyes fixed on Clarence. A sudden chill snaked down Clarence's spine, a primal instinct warning him of impending danger. Before he could react, before he could even process the thought, the boy lunged forward, shoving him hard in the chest. The world tilted. For a moment, Clarence felt suspended, weightless, like a leaf caught in a sudden gust of wind. Then, The ground rushed up to meet him. He landed hard, the air knocked out of his lungs. Pain, sharp and searing, radiated from his hip. The laughter of the teenagers, cruel and mocking, echoed in his ears. He lay there, stunned, the taste of dust thick in his mouth. The morning sun seemed to dim, the world around him blurring at the edges. He felt a wave of dizziness wash over him, a disorienting sense of vulnerability he hadn't experienced in decades. Damn! He fell like a tree. One of them exclaimed, his voice filled with a perverse satisfaction. Upload that. Tag it. Boom a drop. The words, devoid of empathy, devoid of humanity, struck Clarence with the force of a physical blow. He felt a deep, visceral shame, not for himself, but for them, for the emptiness that echoed in their laughter. A woman with grocery bags, her face etched with horror, rushed to his side. Are you all right? Oh my God, are you hurt? Her voice was a lifeline, a beacon of compassion in a sea of indifference. A man in a work uniform dialed 911, his voice firm and reassuring. Help is on the way, sir. Just stay still. Clarence clung to their words, their presence, small anchors in a world that had suddenly become treacherous and unfamiliar. He closed his eyes, the laughter of the teenagers receding, replaced by a low, throbbing ache in his hip. He felt the profound sense of loss, a grief not for his physical well-being, but for something far more precious, the simple, unwavering belief in the inherent goodness of humanity. The crack of Clarence's skull against the sidewalk echoed in the sudden, shocked silence. The world, which had been a pleasant blur of morning sun and the familiar rhythm of his steps, fractured into sharp, agonizing fragments. He tasted blood, metallic and thick, and the scent of asphalt filled his nostrils. His breath hitched, a shallow, ragged thing trapped in his chest. Get up. A voice whispered, a distant echo of ingrained marine discipline. Get up. Doyle. You've been through worse. But his body didn't respond. A wave of nausea washed over him, and a world swam in a dizzying haze. He heard voices, distant and distorted, like a radio struggling to find a signal. The laughter, which had been so close, so cruel just moments ago, was gone. The woman with the groceries dropped her bags. Oranges and a carton of milk splattered on the pavement, a surreal still life against the backdrop of Clarence's crumpled form. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Oh my God. She thought, a visceral wave of fear and anger tightening her chest. Those little bastards. She rushed to Clarence's side, her hand hovering over him, unsure where to touch, afraid to cause further harm. Hey, what the hell is wrong with you? She shouted, her voice trembling with a mixture of fury and concern. She glared at the group of teenagers, their faces now drained of the earlier bravado. They shuffled their feet, avoiding her gaze. One of them, a lanky boy with a faded red hoodie, mumbled, "Chill, lady, he's fine. It was just a joke." He tried to maintain a swagger, but his eyes darted nervously towards the gathering crowd. Internally, a flicker of unease ignited. He hadn't expected this reaction. He hadn't expected the old man to fall so hard. It was Ty's fault. He thought. A desperate attempt to shift the blame. He shoved him too hard. A joke. The woman's voice rose, sharp and incredulous. A joke? He could have broken his back. She knelt beside Clarence, her hand gently touching his arm. Sir, can you hear me? Her voice softened, laced with worrying. She could feel the tremor in his frail body. A man in a work uniform, his face grim, was already on the phone. Yeah. 911. Elderly man assaulted, looks like a head injury, corner of Elm and Mania. Send an ambulance and the police. He hung up and knelt opposite the woman, assessing Clarence's condition. He saw the trickle of blood from a gash on Clarence's forehead. "Stay with him, Mum. Help is on the way." He looked up at the teenagers, his eyes hard. "You kids aren't going anywhere." The teenagers exchanged uneasy glances. The initial thrill of the prank had evaporated, replaced by a cold knot of fear in their stomachs. The boy in the red hoodie, felt a shiver run down his spine. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The video was meant to be funny, a quick hit of viral fame. Now, staring at the old man's pale face and the growing crowd's angry murmurs, a terrifying realization dawned on him. This is serious. This is really serious. Ty, the youngest of the group, a scrawny kid with frightened eyes, whispered, We gotta go." "Shut up, Ty," hissed, his voice tight with anxiety. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him, suffocating him. He glanced around, desperately searching for an escape route. Across the street, Tobias Tank McConnell, a former gunnery sergeant, now working private security, watched the scene unfold, his jaw clench. He'd seen enough in his life to recognize the signs of something deeply wrong. He recognized the way the old man lay, the unnatural angle of his arm. He saw the fear in the woman's eyes, the controlled anger in the work uniform man's voice. Something primal stirred within him, a protective instinct honed over years of service. He started across the street, his gait purposeful, his eyes fixed on the teenagers. Moloch Wynne, a younger Marine veteran, caught up with Tank. "Tank, wait up. Heard about what happened." "Old man door, right?" Tank nodded grimly. "Yeah. Looks bad, Moloch." Those punks. He didn't finish the sentence, his anger simmering just below the surface. A silver-haired woman in a crisp, though retired, military uniform strode towards the scene, her expression a mask of controlled fury. Denise Carter, a retired master sergeant, had no tolerance for bullies, especially when the victim was one of their own. She had known Clarence for years. He was a fixture at the VA, a quiet, gentle soul. Seeing him lying there, helpless and injured, ignited a fire in her gut. Rico Figueroa, another Marine, arrived breathlessly, his face etched with concern. "Clarence! Oh my God! Is that Clarence?" He pushed through the crowd, his eyes fixed on the fallen veteran. Clarence was more than just a familiar face at the VA. He was a symbol, a reminder of the sacrifices made, the values they all held dear. Seeing him like this felt like a personal blow. The crowd continued to grow, murmurs turning into angry whispers. The teenagers, surrounded by the growing circle of onlookers, were trapped. Reese swallowed hard, his throat dry. He could feel the weight of 100 pairs of eyes on him, judging him, condemning him. He looked at Ty, whose face was now streaked with tears. He looked at the old man lying on the sidewalk, his chest rising and falling shallowly. And for the first time, the full weight of his actions crashed down on him. What have we done? He thought, the question echoing in the hollow space of his fear. The cracked pavement radiated heat, a shimmering mirage beneath the midday sun. A small crowd had gathered, a morbid tableau frozen around the crumpled form of Clarence Dorr. The old man lay still, his eyes closed, a thin trickle of blood tracing a path from his temple to the grey stubble dusting his jaw. A woman knelt beside him, her face etched with concern, murmuring soothing words he couldn't hear. Her grocery bags lay scattered, their contents: a loaf of bread, a carton of eggs, a bunch of wilting spinach. A mundane still life against the backdrop of unfolding tragedy. A young man in a dark hoodie hovered on the periphery, his phone held aloft. He wasn't filming anymore. The initial thrill, the sick, twisted satisfaction of capturing the old man's fall, had curdled into something cold and heavy in his gut. He zoomed in on Mr. Dool's blooded face, the image blurring as his hand trembled. Should I delete it? The question echoed in his mind, a hollow counterpoint to the rising murmurs of the crowd. No evidence. Need evidence. His justification felt thin, brittle. He lowered the phone, his thumb hovering over the send button. They'll be impressed. The thought felt wrong. A bitter taste in his mouth. He swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. They have to be. With a shaky exhale, he opened the group chat and attached the video. 3 words. They got Dool. He hit send, his heart pounding a frantic tattoo against his ribs. He glanced up, his gaze darting nervously between the still form of Mr. Doyle and the faces in the crowd, searching for what? Approval, condemnation. He wasn't sure. The message ripped through the digital ether, landing in inboxes like a grenade. They got Doyle. 3 words that ignited a firestorm. Moloch Wynne, scrolling through his phone during his lunch break, felt a chill snake down his spine. Doyle. He knew only one Doyle, the old Marine who bought cherry licorice at Rod's every morning. The one who always had a kind word, a gentle smile. No. He reread the message, the video loading slowly, each pixel a punch to the gut. His hand clenched around his phone. Those little bastards. He forwarded the message to another group chat, a tighter circle, a brotherhood forged in fire and steel. Tank, you seeing this? He typed, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Tobias Tank McConnell. A mountain of a man with a shaved head and a gaze that could melt glaciers, was reviewing security footage at his post when his phone buzzed. He clicked on the video, his jaw tightening with each frame. The casual cruelty, the gleeful laughter, the sheer disregard for human life. It made his blood boil. Doyle, the old man's face, etched with years of laughter and hardship, flashed before his eyes. He'd shared a beer with Doyle at the VFW just last week. Listened to his stories, felt the weight of shared experience, the unspoken bond of brotherhood. Not on my watch. He slammed his laptop shut. I'm out, he barked to his co-worker, already halfway out the door. His phone buzzed again. A flurry of messages. On my way. Where are they? I'm coming to. The cavalry was mobilizing. Within minutes, the first wave arrived. Tank, his broad frame radiating authority, pushed through the crowd. He needs space. Step back. Let the paramedics work when they get here. His voice, low and gravelly, carried an unmistakable command. The onlookers, momentarily stunned, parted like the Red Sea. Moloch followed close behind, his eyes scanning the crowd. He spotted Ree, his hoodie pulled low over his face, his body trembling. Got you. He moved towards him, his steps measured, deliberate. Denise Carter, a retired master sergeant with a glare that could curdle milk, arrived next. She assessed the situation with a practiced eye, taking in the scattered groceries, the bloodstains on the pavement, the fear in the teenager's eyes. Cowards. The word echoed in her mind, a bitter condemnation. She knelt beside Mr. Doyle, checking his pulse, her touch gentle despite the rage simmering beneath the surface. The trickle of Marines became a flood, men and women in various stages of dress, some in uniform, others in civilian clothes, converged on the scene. They formed a protective circle around Mr. Doyle, a silent wall of solidarity. Rico Figueroa, a young Marine with a fresh-faced earnestness, felt a lump form in his throat. He'd seen Mr. Doyle at the VA, a quiet, dignified presence. He hadn't spoken to him much, but the old man's presence had always been a comforting constant, a living link to the Corps' history. Seeing him lying there, vulnerable and hurt, sparked a fierce protectiveness in Rico. He stood a little straighter, his shoulders squared, his gaze fixed on the teenagers. The teenagers, surrounded by a sea of stern faces and hardened gazes, shrunk back, their bravado evaporating like morning mist. Reef felt a hand clamp down on his shoulder, a grip of iron. He looked up into Malik's eyes, a mixture of anger and disgust burning in their depths. It's over, he knew it, with a chilling certainty. The wail of sirens pierced the air, a welcome interruption to the tense silence. The paramedics arrived, pushing through the crowd with practiced efficiency. They loaded Mr. Doyle onto a stretcher, his face pale and still. As they wheeled him away, Denise Carter looked at the teenagers, her gaze unwavering. "You haven't seen the last of us," she said, her voice low and menacing. The fear in Ree's eyes intensify. He looked at Ty, the youngest of their group, his face streaked with tears. "What have we done?" The question echoed in his mind, a hollow refrain to the receding siren's wail. The fluorescent lights of Roger's convenience store hummed a monotonous tune, casting a sickly yellow glow on the scene outside. The crisp morning air, once filled with the promise of a new day, now hung heavy with the residue of violence. A small crowd had gathered, their hush, whispers mingling with the distant sirens inside. The teenagers huddled together, a knot of nervous energy vibrating in the cramped aisles. They weren't browsing the shelves, their eyes darting to the figures outside. Tall, broad-shouldered figures, men who stood with a stillness that spoke of discipline, of a shared history etched in their very stances. Marines. Ty fidgeted, the cheap plastic of the candy wrapper crinkling in his sweaty palm. It was supposed to be funny, he thought, the image of the old man falling replaying in his mind's eye. Just a prank. But the humor had evaporated, replaced by a cold dread that called in his gut. He glanced at Ree, the one who'd actually shoved the old man. Ree stared back, his face a mask of bravado, but Ty saw the flicker of fear in his eyes. The others, too, were silent, their earlier boisterousness extinguished. The air in the store felt thick, suffocating. Outside tanked McConnell, a former gunnery sergeant whose nicknames still fit his imposing frame, surveyed the scene. His gaze swept over the small group of teenagers, lingering on each face, each shifting posture. Kids, he thought, a sigh escaping his lips. They think they know everything. He recognized the glint of defiance, the desperate attempt to maintain a facade of nonchalance. He'd seen it before, on battlefields far removed from this quiet suburban street. But this wasn't war. This was something far more insidious. Disrespect, cowardice. Moloch Wynne, a younger Marine, stood beside Tank, his jaw tight. "They picked the wrong old man to mess with," he muttered, his voice low. Tank nodded. He knew Clarence Doyle. Everyone in the VA community knew Clarence. The old man's daily walks were a ritual, a testament to his resilience, his spirit. To see him lying there, vulnerable, his gentle face etched with pain, ignited a fury within Tank that ran deeper than any battlefield rage. Denise Carter, a retired master sergeant whose sharp eyes missed nothing, joined them. "Heard the call on the scanner," she said, her voice clipped and precise. "Clarence, huh?" The unspoken question hung in the air. Who would do this? Rico Figueroa, another Marine, arrived, his face pale. He'd seen Clarence just yesterday at the VA, the old man, sharing stories with the younger vets, his eyes twinkling with humor. "Clarence, he's like a grandfather to us all," Rico whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Inside the store, Ty couldn't stand it anymore. The silence, the weight of their gazes, the non-guilt. It was too much. He slipped past the others, pushing open the door, the bell above it jingling discordantly in the tense atmosphere. He stepped outside, the Marine's eyes turning towards him, their expressions unreadable. "I'm sorry," he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. Or words felt hollow, inadequate. He looked down at his shoes, unable to meet their gaze. "They're going to kill me," he thought, his heart pounding in his chest. Tank stepped forward, his shadow falling over Tai. "Sorry for what?" he asked, his voice quiet but firm. For what happened to Mr. Doyle?" Tai mumbled, his eyes welling up. "He knows my name." Tai realized with a jolt. "He knows who I am." Dude was in the way. One of the teenagers inside the store called out, his voice laced with bravado. The words hung in the air, a stark reminder of the callous indifference that had led to this moment. "In the way." Tank's voice was dangerously low. "He's 90. He turned back too. "Tai, you shoved him." Tai shook his head vehemently. "No, sir. It wasn't me. It was he." Hesitated, glancing back at the store. He could feel the others watching him, waiting. Denise stepped forward. "Who?" she asked, her voice sharp. Before Tai could answer, Tank turned towards the store. He called out, his voice carrying an authority that silenced the whispers inside. "Get out here." A moment of tense silence followed before Ree emerged, his face pale, his bravado gone. He looked smaller now, stripped of his earlier swagger. He avoided Tai's gaze. "You shoved him. Own it." Tank said, his eyes boring into Ree. Ree swallowed hard. "I didn't mean to hurt him," he mumbled, his voice barely audible. "We ain't here to beat you," Denise said, her voice surprisingly gentle. "We're here to help him remember." She glanced towards the ambulance that had just arrived, its flashing lights painting the scene in stark red and white. "Help him remember that there are still people in this world who care." Tai finally broke down, the tears streaming down his face. "I'm so sorry," he sobbed, the words choked with emotion. We just wanted to make a video. We didn't." He couldn't finish the sentence. The weight of what they'd done, the consequences of their thoughtless actions, finally crashed down on him. He looked at the Marines, at their faces etched with concern, with anger, with a deep, unwavering loyalty to the old man lying in the ambulance. And in that moment, Tai understood. He understood the bond they shared, the respect they held for Clarence, and the profound disrespect they felt for what he and his friends had done. He understood the depth of the chasm that separated their world of fleeting online fame from the Marines' world of unwavering loyalty and profound respect. And he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that he would never forget this day. The sterile scent of antiseptic bit into Clarence's nostrils, a stark contrast to the fresh morning air he'd been enjoying just hours before. He blinked, vision blurry, a dull ache throbbing in his hip. Where? White walls, the rustle of starched fabric, a rhythmic beeping that tugged at the edge of his consciousness. The hospital. The fall, those bows. The fragmented images swam through his mind, leaving a bitter taste. He tried to sit up, a sharp pain lancing through his side. "Easy there." Clarence, a deep voice, familiar yet distant, his eyes focused on a figure in a crisp uniform. Tank, Tobias McConnell, his old gunny from back in Korea. Relief washed over him, a warm current in the frigid hospital room. What happened?" he rasped, his throat dry. "You took a tumble, Clarence. Those punks are being dealt with." Tank's voice was gruff, yet Clarence detected a tremor of suppressed rage. Clarence knew that tone, the quiet fury that simmered beneath the surface of a Marine. He closed his eyes, the memory of the shove, the laughter, a hard impact against the pavement, echoing in his mind. Was this how it would end? His routine walks, his simple pleasures, snatched away by a senseless act. He felt a hand, rough and calloused, gently grip his. "You're going to be all right, Clarence. We got you." The following weeks melted into a blur of pain medication, physical therapy, and an outpouring of support that Clarence could scarcely comprehend. His small hospital room became a constant stream of visitors, Marines, old and young. Some he knew, many he didn't. They came bearing flowers, cards, stories, and an unwavering sense of solidarity that warmed him from the inside out. He learned the details piecemeal. The police had apprehended the bows. The video, intended to be their claim to fame, had instead sparked an inferno of outrage. He heard whispers of disciplinary actions, potential legal consequences, but strangely, Clarence felt no desire for retribution. He saw their faces in his mind, young, reckless, caught in a tide they hadn't understood. "They're just kids," he murmured to Tank one afternoon, the words heavy with a weariness that went beyond his physical pain. Tank shifted uncomfortably. "They hurt you, Clarence. That's not kid stuff." "I know." Clarence sighed, staring at the ceiling. The sterile white a stark contrast to the vibrant blue sky he longed to see. "But jail won't teach them anything." "I don't want jail for them." 3 weeks later, Clarence sat on his porch, the late afternoon sun warming his face. His hip still ached, but the pain was receding, replaced by a dull throb that served as a constant reminder of the incident. He watched the familiar rhythm of his street. Mr. Calvin waving from across the road, Rog from the corner store giving a thumbs up. The woman with the groceries who'd rushed to his aid stopped to chat, her voice filled with genuine concern. Something had shifted. The easy camaraderie he'd always enjoyed with his neighbors had deepened, transformed into a shared understanding, a silent pact to protect their own. And he saw them, 5 teenagers, shuffling awkwardly down the sidewalk, their eyes downcast. He recognized the boy who'd shoved him. His face pale, etched with a mixture of fear and remorse. They stopped in front of his house. Cleared his throat. "Mr. Tall." His voice was barely a whisper. Clarence nodded, his heart pounding a slow, steady rhythm against his ribs. We came to apologize." The words tumbled out, rushed, desperate. Clarence looked at them, really looked at them, seeing past the bravado, the misplaced swagger, to the uncertainty that flickered in their eyes. "You don't think we're just bad kids?" Another boy, Ty, the youngest, blurted out, his voice cracking with unshed tears. Clarence shook his head. "I think you all just didn't know better. But now you do. That's when choices matter most." After you know better, over the next few weeks, the boys became a fixture in Clarence's neighborhood, not as perpetrators, but as volunteers. They helped Mrs. Henderson with her garden, painted the fence at the community center, and even started a neighborhood watch program. They talked to Clarence, not with the brash defiance of that fateful morning, but with a quiet respect that surprised and moved him. Especially, seemed to gravitate towards Clarence, often stopping by to chat about school, his dreams, his anxieties. Clarence listened patiently, offering advice, a gentle hand on the shoulder, a silent assurance that redemption was possible. He saw the change in them, the gradual blossoming of responsibility, the understanding that their actions had consequences, not just for themselves, but for the entire community. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across his porch, sat beside Clarence, a quiet understanding passing between them. "I never thought I never realized," began, his voice trailing off. Clarence smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "You realize now, that's all that matters." He looked out at his street, at the neighbors chatting, children playing, a sense of peace settling over the community. The assault had been a violation, a wound, but from that wound, something unexpected had bloomed. A renewed sense of community, a testament to the enduring power of forgiveness, and a quiet hope for the future. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Clarence's porch, painting the warm wooden planks in hues of amber and gold. 3 weeks had passed since the incident. 3 weeks that had felt like a lifetime and a blink all at once. The rocking chair creaked gently beneath him, a familiar rhythm that had once been a solitary solace, now punctuated by the soft murmur of voices from the street. He could hear the rhythmic slap of basketballs, the distant laughter of children, the low hum of a lawnmower, the ordinary sounds of a neighborhood coming back to life. He closed his eyes, the phantom pain in his hip a dull ache. It wasn't the physical pain that lingered, but the echo of the shock, the disorientation, the sudden and brutal severing of his connection to the world. He opened his eyes, his gaze drifting to the bandage still wrapped around his forearm. The physical wounds were healing, the bruises fading, but the emotional scars were a different story. He'd lived through worse, seen things that would haunt most men for a lifetime. But this felt different. This was a violation not just of his body, but of something more profound, a sense of belonging, a trust in the basic decency of humanity. Mr. Doyle, how are you feeling today? Rog, the owner of the corner store where Clarence bought his daily candy, approached the porch steps, a plastic bag rustling in his hand. Clarence managed a small smile, a flicker of warmth in his eyes. Better, Rog. Much better. It wasn't entirely true, but he felt a strange compulsion to reassure everyone, to minimize the impact, to restore the equilibrium he'd lost. Rog's face, usually bright and cheerful, held a lingering shadow of concern. We were all so worried, Mr. Doyle, the whole neighborhood. He placed the bag on the small table beside Clarence's chair. Some treats for you. On the house, Clarence felt a lump forming in his throat. This outpouring of support, the unexpected kindness from his neighbors, it was both comforting and unsettling. He wasn't used to being the center of attention, the recipient of so much concern. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the oak tree at the edge of the yard. Clarence could hear the approaching rumble of motorcycles, a sound that usually sent a shiver of unease down his spine. But this time, it was different. This time, he knew who was coming. He'd seen them almost every day since the incident. They came in small groups, sometimes just 1 or 2, sometimes a dozen or more. They sat with him on the porch, sharing stories, offering silent companionship. They brought groceries, ran errands, fixed things around the house. They were his Marines. Tobias Tank McConnell, his bulk filling the porch steps, was the first to arrive. "Afternoon, Clarence," he said, his voice gruff but gentle. "Everything all right?" Behind him, Denise Carter, her face etched with a quiet determination, nodded a greeting. Molly Gwynn, younger, leaner, but with the same steady gaze, followed close behind. And then there was Rico Figueroa, his eyes still filled with a mixture of anger and sorrow. Clarence watched them, a strange mix of gratitude and guilt swirling within him. "I'm fine. Tank, really, you all don't have to keep checking on me." He knew they wouldn't stop. They couldn't. This wasn't just about him. It was about something bigger, something that ran deeper than blood. It was about the unspoken code, the unwavering loyalty, the bond forged in fire and tempered by time. The conversation flowed easily, the usual mix of jokes and reminiscences, punctuated by comfortable silences. Clarence noticed a group of teenagers gathering at the edge of the street, their faces hesitant, their eyes fixed on him. He recognized one of them, the boy Ree, who had shoved him. The boy's gaze held a mixture of fear and something else, remorse. He shifted uncomfortably, his hands fidgeting in his pockets. Clarence's heart clenched. He saw himself in that boy, the recklessness of youth, the vulnerability masked by bravado. Denise, her sharp eyes missing nothing, followed Clarence's gaze. "Don't worry about them, Clarence," she said, her voice low but firm. "They've learned their lesson." Clarence met her gaze, a question forming in his eyes. "They've been helping out at the VA, cleaning up the community center." Community service, Clarence nodded slowly, a thought taking root in his mind. He gestured towards the teenagers. "Let them come over," he said, his voice surprisingly steady. Tank hesitated, a flicker of doubt in his eyes. But Clarence held his gaze. "It's all right, Tank, let them come." The teenagers approached cautiously, re-leading the way. He stopped a few feet from the porch, his eyes downcast. "Mr. Doyle," he mumbled, his voice barely audible. "I'm sorry." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken emotion. Clarence looked at him, a wave of empathy washing over him. He remembered the fear in the boy's eyes after the incident, the realization of the consequences of his actions. "I know you are, son," he said, his voice soft. "I know you are." He turned his gaze to the side of the building across the street. A new mural had been painted there, vibrant and bold, depicting a silhouette of a Marine walking, his cane held high. Below it, in large block letters, were the words, "Respect the walk." He looked back at the teenagers, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Because someone forgave me once, too. A long time ago. We don't grow if nobody gives us space to change." Teenagers stood there for a moment, absorbing his words. Then, one by one, they nodded, a silent acknowledgement of his forgiveness, a promise of a different future. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that stretched across the street, connecting the porch to the mural, connecting the past to the present, connecting one generation to the next. The air was filled with the sounds of the neighborhood, the ordinary sounds of life going on, a symphony of hope and resilience, a testament to the enduring power of community. And in the quiet stillness of his heart, Clarence felt a flicker of peace, a fragile but persistent ember of hope, rekindled in the ashes of pain.